They say humans are the universe's greatest survivors, adaptable, resilient, impossibly stubborn. What they don't tell you is that sometimes survival comes with a price tag written in alien DNA. When Dr. Sarah Chin volunteered for first contact protocols aboard the research vessel Meridian, she expected diplomatic handshakes and cultural exchanges. She didn't expect to be poisoned by the galaxy's most feared warrior race within the first 10 minutes. She definitely didn't expect to wake up 3 days later with her molecular structure rewritten and a 7-foot alien huntress claiming her as a mate. The Kithara have conquered 17 star systems. Their toxin has never failed to kill. Until now. This is the story of how humanity's greatest weakness became its most dangerous strength, and how one woman's immunity to death became the key to something far more terrifying than war: love across the void. Dr. Sarah Chun had always believed that first contact would be civilized. Academic conferences and her years studying xenobiology had painted romantic pictures of peaceful meetings between species, complete with universal translators and diplomatic protocols. Reality, as she discovered while floating unconscious in the medical bay of the research vessel Meridian, had very different plans. The first sensation that crept back into her awareness was pain, not the sharp kind that demanded immediate attention, but a deep, cellular ache that seemed to emanate from her very bones. Her mouth tasted like copper and ozone, and when she tried to open her eyes, the soft blue lighting of the medical bay felt like staring directly into a star. "She's awake," came a voice she recognized as Dr. Martinez, the ship's chief medical officer. His tone carried something she'd never heard from him before: genuine bewilderment mixed with what sounded suspiciously like fear. Sarah's throat felt like she'd been gargling with broken glass. But she managed to croak out a single word: report. The silence that followed lasted too long. In her 15 years of deep space research, Sarah had learned to read the weight of silence. This one was heavy enough to crush planets. "Sarah," Dr. Martinez began carefully, "you've been unconscious for 73 hours. We weren't sure you were going to wake up." Memory came flooding back in fragments. The Meridian had been investigating energy signatures in the Tau Ceti system when they'd encountered the ship. Not debris, not ruins. An active vessel of unknown configuration that had been drifting between two gas giants like a predator waiting for prey. Captain Reeves had ordered standard first contact protocols, and Sarah, as the senior xenobiologist, had been part of the 3-person delegation sent aboard. The alien ship had been a masterpiece of organic technology. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. The air had tasted of storms and something indefinably predatory. And the beings they'd encountered. "The Kithara," Sarah whispered, the name coming back to her like a physical blow. "You remember," Martinez said, and she could hear him moving closer to her bedside. "That's good. That's very good. We weren't sure how much neural damage." The delegation. Sarah forced her eyes open despite the light sensitivity, focusing on Martinez's worried face. "Commander Torres? Dr. Yuki?" Martinez's expression told her everything she needed to know before he spoke. "I'm sorry, Sarah. The toxin, it worked exactly as their databases indicated it would. Neural cascade failure within 90 seconds of contact. They never had a chance." Sarah closed her eyes, seeing again the moment when everything had gone wrong. The Kithara delegation had consisted of 3 beings that stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in chitinous armor that seemed to shift color depending on the lighting. They moved with the fluid grace of apex predators, and their faces, elongated, with large eyes that reflected light like mirrors, had been utterly unreadable. The lead Kithara, distinguished by the intricate scarification that covered her visible chitin, had stepped forward first. Sarah remembered thinking how remarkably humanoid the gesture was, how it suggested similar concepts of leadership and responsibility across species lines. The translator had rendered her words in crisp, emotionless English. "We greet you in the manner of our kind." What followed had not been a greeting by any human standard. The lead Kithara had extended her hand, and when Commander Torres had reached out to accept what appeared to be a peaceful gesture, she'd raked her claws across his palm. The wounds had been shallow, barely drawing blood, but the effect had been immediate and catastrophic. Torres had collapsed within seconds, his nervous system shutting down as whatever toxin the Kithra naturally secreted went to work. Dr. Yuki had rushed to help him, only to receive the same treatment. Sarah had watched in horror as her colleagues died, their faces twisting in agony as their bodies betrayed them. Then, the lead Kithra had turned to her. "You were exposed," Martinez continued, his voice bringing her back to the present. "Full contact, just like the others. We extracted you immediately, but by the time we got you to medical, you were already showing signs of neural cascade failure. Your brain activity flatlined 3 separate times." Sarah sat up slowly, her head spinning. The movement should have been impossible if she'd suffered the kind of neural damage Martinez was describing, but aside from the lingering ache in her bones and a persistent metallic taste in her mouth, she felt remarkably normal. "But I didn't die," she observed. "No," Martinez agreed, and his tone suggested this fact troubled him deeply. "You didn't die? And, according to our scans, you should have. The Kithra toxin is incredibly well documented. Our databases contain records from 17 different species that have encountered them over the past 3 centuries. The mortality rate is 100%. No exceptions, no survivors, no immunity." Sarah swung her legs over the side of the medical bed, testing her balance. Everything seemed to be working properly, which was more than she'd expected. "What's my blood work showing?" Martinez hesitated, then pulled up a holographic display that materialized between them. The complex molecular structures floating in the air meant nothing to Sarah at first glance, but Martinez's commentary made their significance clear. "The toxin is still in your system," he said, highlighting certain compounds in red. "Not only that, it appears to be actively bonding with your DNA. We've never seen anything like it. It's not destroying your cellular structure, it's rewriting it." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Genetic modification by alien toxins was the stuff of bad science fiction, not legitimate xenobiology. "That's impossible. The toxin is designed to kill, not modify." "That's what we thought too," Martinez agreed. "But the evidence is right there in your bloodstream. Whatever the Kithra introduced into your system, it's not behaving like a toxin anymore. It's behaving like a catalyst." Sarah studied the molecular diagrams floating before her, her mind racing through the possibilities. Her specialty was xenobiology, with particular focus on interspecies chemical interactions. She'd spent years studying how different alien biochemistries might affect human physiology, but this defied everything she thought she knew. "Have you been in contact with the Kithra ship since the incident?" she asked. Martinez's expression darkened. "That's where things get complicated. They haven't left. In fact, they've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "You, apparently. They've been broadcasting a single message on repeat for the past 3 days. The universal translator renders it as, 'The marked one must return when she awakens.'" Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the medical-based temperature control. "Marked one. We think it refers to you. The toxin exposure has left some visible changes." Martinez handed her a mirror, and Sarah almost dropped it when she saw her reflection. Her eyes, normally a warm brown, now held flecks of silver that seemed to move independently of her iris. The effect was subtle but unmistakable, like stars caught in amber. "It's not just cosmetic," Martinez continued. "Your neural activity is showing patterns we've never seen before. Enhanced processing speed, improved pattern recognition, increased sensory acuity. Whatever that toxin did to you, it's made you more than human." Sarah set down the mirror, her hands trembling slightly. The scientist in her was fascinated, but the human part was terrified. "More than human" sounded like the beginning of a horror story, not an evolution. "The captain wants to see you as soon as you're able," Martinez said. "The Kithra ship is maintaining position at exactly 1,000 kilometers. They're not threatening us, but they're also making it clear they're not leaving without something." Sarah nodded, pushing herself to her feet. The movement sent another wave of that strange cellular ache through her body, but she remained stable. "I need to see the data from their ship. Everything we recorded during the encounter." "Sarah, you've been unconscious for 3 days. You should rest. Let us run more tests." "Doctor," she interrupted, and was surprised by the authority in her own voice. Something had changed in her, something deeper than enhanced senses or modified DNA. Two of my colleagues are dead because we didn't understand what we were dealing with. I'm not going to let that ignorance continue. Martinez studied her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. I'll have the data transferred to your quarters. But, Sarah, whatever's happening to you, it's accelerating. These scans were taken 6 hours apart. He pulled up two comparative displays, and Sarah could see the differences immediately. The alien compounds in her bloodstream were not only spreading, they were multiplying, creating new neural pathways and enhancing existing ones at a rate that should have been biologically impossible. How long do I have? She asked quietly. We don't know. This is completely uncharted territory. For all we know, you could stabilize at your current state, or... He trailed off, but Sarah could fill in the blanks. Or she could continue changing until she was no longer recognizably human. The walk to her quarters felt different than it had 3 days ago. Her senses seemed hyperactive, picking up sounds, and scents she'd never noticed before. The ship's environmental systems hummed with a complexity that was almost musical, and she could smell the distinct biochemical signatures of every person she passed in the corridors. Her quarters were exactly as she'd left them, but when she activated her workstation and began reviewing the data from the Kythera encounter, she found she could process information at a rate that should have been impossible. Complex biochemical analyses that would normally take hours to understand became clear within minutes. The Kythera toxin wasn't just a weapon, it was a test. The realization hit her with stunning clarity as she cross-referenced the molecular structure of the toxin with known Kythera biological markers. The compound was designed to kill most species on contact, but it contained specific protein sequences that would only be recognized and safely processed by beings with compatible genetic markers. It was a compatibility test, she realized. A brutal but effective way of determining whether another species could successfully integrate with Kythera biology. And somehow, impossibly, humans, or at least she, had passed. The implications were staggering. The Kythera weren't just warriors, they were builders of something larger. The toxin exposure wasn't an attack or an accident. It was an invitation. But an invitation to what? Sarah's enhanced pattern recognition abilities were already working on the answer, processing data streams that her normal human brain would never have been able to handle. The Kythera ship's energy signature, their technology, even their social structure as evidenced by the encounter, it all pointed to something she hadn't considered before. They weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They were collectors, and they had just found something they wanted to add to their collection. The communication system in her quarters chimed with an incoming transmission. Sarah accepted it, and Captain Reeves' weathered face appeared on her screen. Dr. Chun, good to see you awake. How are you feeling? Different, Sarah answered honestly. But functional. Captain, I've been reviewing the encounter data, and I think we've misunderstood what happened. Reeves leaned forward, his expression intense. Explain. The toxin exposure wasn't an attack. It was a test. The Kythera have been evaluating other species for compatibility with their biology. Most fail and die. But, in rare cases, when the genetic markers align properly, they survive and are transformed, Reeves finished. Like you. Exactly. And I think that's why they're waiting. They want to see what I've become. The captain was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Chun, are you suggesting we should trust the species that just killed 2 of our people? I'm suggesting that Commander Torres and Dr. Yuki died because they were incompatible with Kythera biology. I survived because I am compatible. And, if my analysis is correct, this compatibility could be the key to understanding one of the most advanced species in known space. Reeves studied her through the screen, and Sarah could see him weighing the potential benefits against the obvious risks. What are you proposing? I want to return to their ship. Absolutely not. You've been poisoned and genetically modified by an alien species. We don't know what they've done to you or what they want from you. Captain, with respect, we're sitting next to a ship that represents technology centuries ahead of our own, operated by beings who have successfully expanded across multiple star systems. They're offering us an opportunity to learn from them. We can't let fear override our scientific responsibility. Your scientific responsibility doesn't extend to sacrificing yourself for data, Doctor. Sarah felt a flash of frustration that seemed amplified by whatever changes were occurring in her nervous system. Sir, I'm not the same person who left this ship 3 days ago. I can process information faster, see patterns that were invisible to me before, and apparently survive toxins that would kill any other human. If there's anyone on this ship who can safely make contact with the Kithara, it's me. The captain's expression softened slightly. Sarah, you've been through trauma. Your body and mind have been altered in ways we don't understand. This isn't the time to make decisions that could affect the safety of this entire crew. Captain, Sarah said quietly, they've been waiting for 3 days. They could have destroyed us at any time. Their weapons technology is clearly superior to ours. Instead, they're maintaining a respectful distance and broadcasting a message about the Marked One returning. They're not acting like conquerors. They're acting like they're waiting for someone to keep an appointment. The truth was, Sarah could feel the pull herself. Something in her modified genetics was responding to proximity to the Kithara ship, like a compass needle drawn to magnetic north. The sensation was growing stronger by the hour, and she suspected it wouldn't be long before the choice was taken out of their hands entirely. I need 12 hours to consider this, Reeves said finally. In the meantime, I want you to undergo a full psychological evaluation with Dr. Patel, and I want continuous medical monitoring. If these changes are affecting your judgment, I understand, Captain, but you should know, I don't think 12 hours is going to change anything. Whatever they did to me, it's designed to bring me back to them. Fighting it might not be possible. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the increasingly insistent pull she felt toward the alien ship. She tried to focus on her research, but her enhanced senses kept drawing her attention to the viewport in her quarters. Through the transparent aluminum, she could just make out the distinctive organic curves of the Kithara vessel. Somewhere aboard that ship, beings who had rewritten her DNA on a molecular level were waiting for her to fulfill a purpose she didn't yet understand. The rational part of her mind was terrified, but the part that had been changed, the part that was becoming something more than human, was curious. And beneath both fear and curiosity was a growing certainty that her transformation was far from complete. The Kithara had marked her for something, and until she understood what that something was, neither she nor her crew would be safe. The silver flecks in her eyes seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat as she stared out at the alien ship, and Sarah realized with growing clarity that the choice had already been made. The only question now was whether she would go willingly or be compelled by the changes in her own biology. Either way, she would return to the Kithara. It was simply a matter of time. The psychological evaluation with Dr. Patel lasted 4 hours and raised more questions than it answered. Sarah found herself processing the doctor's tests at a speed that seemed to unnerve the psychiatrist, completing complex pattern recognition exercises in seconds and displaying memory recall that bordered on perfect. When Dr. Patel asked her to describe her emotional state, Sarah realized that even her feelings had become more complex, layered with sensations and responses that didn't have names in any human language. Your cognitive abilities have clearly been enhanced, Dr. Patel concluded, reviewing the test results with obvious bewilderment. But I'm concerned about the psychological implications of such rapid change. The human mind isn't designed to process information at the rate you're demonstrating. Sarah nodded, understanding the doctor's concern but unable to share it. The enhanced processing didn't feel overwhelming or unnatural. It felt like finally being able to see clearly after a lifetime of looking through fog. Doctor, am I still psychologically human? Dr. Patel hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the question. That's difficult to determine. Your personality patterns remain consistent with your previous evaluations, but the speed and complexity of your cognitive processes have changed dramatically. I can't predict how these changes might affect your decision-making or judgment over time. But you can't find any evidence of current impairment? No, Dr. Patel admitted reluctantly. If anything, you seem more emotionally stable than before the incident. But, Sarah, we're in completely uncharted territory here. I can't guarantee that your current state will remain stable. After the evaluation, Sarah returned to her quarters to find Captain Reeves waiting for her. His expression was grim, and he was accompanied by Lieutenant Commander Wong, the ship's tactical officer. Dr. Reeves began without preamble. We've been monitoring the Kithara ship, and we've detected some concerning developments. What kind of developments? Wong pulled up a holographic display showing the energy signatures from both ships. Their power output has been steadily increasing over the past 6 hours. Not dramatically, but consistently. We think they're charging weapons systems. Sarah studied the energy patterns, her enhanced analytical abilities immediately spotting details that would have escaped her notice before. Those aren't weapons signatures, she said with certainty. Look at the harmonic frequencies. They're too regular, too stable. This is some kind of preparation protocol. Preparation for what? Reeves asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, accessing memories that seemed both her own and somehow alien. The knowledge was there in her mind, planted by the genetic modifications, but only now becoming accessible. They're preparing to leave. Leave? The waiting period is almost over. If I don't return to their ship within the next 6 hours, they'll consider the test failed and move on to the next potential candidate. Wong and the captain exchanged glances. How do you know that? Wong asked. Sarah touched her temple, where a faint headache had been building for the past hour. I'm not entirely sure. The information just seems to be available to me now, like accessing a database I didn't know I had. That's exactly what I was afraid of, Reeves said grimly. Sarah, they've altered your mind in ways we don't understand. How do we know this knowledge is accurate and not some form of manipulation? Because it doesn't benefit them to lie to me, Sarah replied, the certainty of the statement surprising her. If they wanted to force me to return, they could simply activate whatever biological compulsions they've built into the toxin. The fact that they're giving me a choice suggests they want willing cooperation. A choice? Reeves raised an eyebrow. You just said they'll leave if you don't return. That sounds like coercion to me. Sarah shook her head, feeling knowledge surface from the depths of her modified consciousness. Captain, the Kithara don't take unwilling partners. Their entire reproductive and social structure is based on compatibility and choice. They could have designed their toxin to create mindless slaves, but instead they created something that enhances cognitive function and preserves free will. The words came out naturally, but as soon as she spoke them, Sarah realized she had no idea how she knew such intimate details about Kithara society. The knowledge felt foreign yet familiar, like remembering a conversation from childhood. Partners. Wong picked up on the word choice. Dr. Chun, what exactly do you think they want from you? Sarah closed her eyes, trying to access the alien knowledge that seemed to be growing in her mind like a living thing. What she found there made her stagger backward against the wall. Oh, she whispered, understanding flooding through her enhanced neural pathways. Oh no, what is it? Reeves moved toward her, concern clear on his face. The test wasn't just for biological compatibility, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was for genetic compatibility. The Kithara are dying out. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah could see the implications processing on both officers' faces as they reached the same conclusion she had. They're looking for mates, Wong said finally. Not just mates, Sarah corrected, accessing more of the alien knowledge. They're looking for a species that can successfully hybridize with them. Their reproductive rate has been declining for centuries as their biology has become more specialized. They need genetic diversity to survive. And humans can provide that. Reeves asked. Apparently, some humans can. The toxin was testing for specific genetic markers that would indicate successful biological integration. Most species lack these markers entirely and simply die from exposure. But in rare cases, you get humans who can survive the process and become something new, Reeves finished. Something that bridges the gap between species. Sarah nodded, the reality of her situation becoming clearer with each passing moment. The Kithara aren't conquerors, Captain. They're refugees. They've been searching for a species that can help them avoid extinction, and they think they may have found it in humanity. But why the aggressive reputation? Our databases list them as having conquered 17 star systems. Sarah accessed her new knowledge, finding the answer with disturbing ease. Because those 17 species failed the test. When a species proves incompatible, the Kithara take their resources and move on. It's not conquest for the sake of expansion, it's desperate resource gathering by a dying race. The implications were staggering. Humanity had just made contact with one of the galaxy's most advanced species, and That species was seeking a partnership that went far beyond simple diplomacy or trade agreements. They were offering genetic integration and shared technology in exchange for helping them avoid extinction. Dr. Chun, Captain Reeves said carefully, I need to ask you directly. Do you believe you're still capable of making rational decisions about this situation? Or are these biological modifications influencing your judgment? Sarah considered the question seriously. The enhanced processing power was certainly affecting how she thought, but her core personality and values seemed unchanged. If anything, she felt more like herself than she had in years, more focused, more capable, more confident in her abilities. I believe I'm still me, Captain. Enhanced, but still me. And I believe this is the most important decision our species has ever faced. Explain. The Kithara have technology that could advance human civilization by centuries. Medical knowledge that could eliminate genetic diseases, energy systems that could power entire planets, transportation methods that make our current ships look like horse-drawn carriages. They're offering to share all of this in exchange for genetic compatibility. And the price is human women being transformed into alien human hybrids. Sarah shook her head. Not just women. The compatibility markers exist in both human sexes. And transformation isn't the right word, it's enhancement. I'm still human, Captain, just more than I was before. How can you be sure? You've been changed on a molecular level by a species we know almost nothing about. How do we know this isn't all part of some elaborate manipulation? The question hit Sarah like a physical blow because she couldn't answer it with certainty. The knowledge in her head felt real and accurate, but its source was undeniably alien. How could she trust information that had been literally written into her DNA by beings whose motivations she was only beginning to understand? But as she considered the question, other evidence began to surface. Her enhanced analytical abilities were allowing her to process data from the ship's sensors in real time. And what she was seeing didn't support a conquest scenario. Captain, may I access the ship's sensor array directly? Reeves and Wong exchanged glances. What do you need it for? I want to verify something. My enhanced processing capabilities should allow me to analyze their ship's configuration in ways that weren't possible before. After a moment's hesitation, Reeves nodded to Wong, who established the connection. Immediately, Sarah's consciousness seemed to expand as data from the Meridian sensors flooded her enhanced neural pathways. The Kithara ship was a masterpiece of biological engineering, but as Sarah analyzed its structure with her new capabilities, she began to see things that standard analysis had missed. The ship wasn't designed for war, it was designed for exploration and research. The energy signatures they had mistaken for weapons were actually sophisticated scanning arrays, genetic analysis equipment, and what appeared to be biological preservation systems. They're not a warship, Sarah announced, her eyes still closed as she processed the sensor data. They're scientists. This entire ship is designed for genetic research and biological preservation. Are you certain? Wong asked. Sarah opened her eyes, silver flecks swirling like stars in her irises. Completely. What we interpreted as aggressive positioning was actually careful observation. They've been studying us just as intensively as we've been studying them. The knowledge was changing her perspective on everything that had happened. Commander Torres and Dr. Yuki hadn't died in an attack. They had died as casualties of a scientific test that the Kithara had hoped they would survive. The fact that they hadn't survived was likely as disappointing to the aliens as it had been devastating to the humans. Captain, Sarah said slowly, I think I need to return to their ship. Absolutely not. Sir, they're leaving in 6 hours regardless. If I don't go, we lose this opportunity forever. And based on what I'm seeing in their ship's configuration, they have information that could revolutionize human understanding of genetics, medicine, and biotechnology. And if you're wrong? If this is all manipulation designed to get you back aboard their ship? Sarah was quiet for a moment, honestly considering the possibility. Then, I die. And you have your answer about their intentions. But, Captain, I don't think I'm wrong. The biological modifications they've made to me aren't control mechanisms, they're gifts. Enhanced intelligence, improved pattern recognition, increased sensory acuity. These aren't changes you make to a slave or a victim. These are changes you make to a partner. The word hung in the air between them. carrying implications that none of them were entirely comfortable with. Partnership with an alien species was one thing. Biological integration was something else entirely. Even if you're right about their intentions, Reeves said finally, you're talking about fundamentally altering what it means to be human. Do you have the right to make that decision for our entire species? I'm not making it for our species, Sarah replied. I'm making it for myself. And, if my analysis is correct, there will be others who are compatible. The Kithara aren't looking for one human partner. They're looking for a subset of humanity that can help them rebuild their population while advancing both species. A subset that would presumably include you. Sarah nodded, though the thought still sent chills through her enhanced nervous system. The modifications aren't random, Captain. They're preparing me for deeper integration. If I return to their ship, the process will continue until I'm fully compatible with their biology. And then what? You spend the rest of your life as an alien-human hybrid. I spend the rest of my life as something new, Sarah corrected. Something that represents the first step toward a partnership between species that could reshape the galaxy. The communication system chimed with an incoming transmission, and Wong immediately brought it up on the holographic display. The alien script that appeared was untranslatable, but, after a moment, Sarah found herself reading it without conscious effort. What does it say? Reeves asked. Sarah's voice was steady despite the magnitude of what she was reading. The marked one has 4 hours to decide. If she chooses to return, the integration will be completed and the partnership begun. If she chooses to remain, the Kithara will honor her decision and depart in peace. They're giving you an ultimatum, Wong observed. No, Sarah said, understanding the nuance in ways that her unenhanced mind would never have grasped. They're offering me a choice. There's a difference. And, as she spoke the words, Sarah realized that her decision had already been made. The enhanced intelligence, the expanded sensory awareness, the growing knowledge of Kithara society, it all pointed toward a future that was both terrifying and exhilarating. She was going back to their ship. The only question now was whether she would go with her captain's blessing or in spite of his orders. Captain, she said quietly, I need you to know that I'm still Dr. Sarah Chun. I'm still the woman who volunteered for this mission because I believed in the importance of expanding human knowledge and capability. What's happening to me isn't destroying who I am. It's revealing who I could become. And who is that exactly? Sarah looked out through the viewport at the alien ship, feeling the biological pull growing stronger with each passing hour. The bridge between two species that could accomplish things neither could achieve alone. The silver in her eyes seemed to pulse with its own light as she spoke, and Captain Reeves realized that regardless of what he decided, Dr. Sarah Chun was no longer entirely human. The question was whether what she was becoming would be better or worse than what she had been. The shuttle bay was eerily quiet as Sarah prepared for her return to the Kithara ship. Captain Reeves had ultimately given his reluctant approval, recognizing that trying to prevent her departure might endanger the entire crew if the biological compulsions became too strong to resist. Dr. Martinez had insisted on giving her a full medical kit and emergency beacon, though they both knew that human medical technology would be useless if something went wrong aboard an alien vessel. You don't have to do this, Martinez said as he checked her equipment one final time. We could try to find another way to make contact, establish communication protocols that don't require you to sacrifice myself? Sarah finished. Doctor, I appreciate the concern, but this isn't a sacrifice. It's an evolution. The words sounded strange even to her own enhanced hearing, but they felt true in a way that her previous human thoughts never had. The modifications the Kithara had made to her biology weren't just physical, they were changing her perspective on existence itself. Lieutenant Commander Wong approached with a small device that Sarah didn't recognize. Emergency communicator, he explained. Quantum entangled with our main system. As long as both ships remain in the same star system, we should be able to maintain contact. Sarah clipped the device to her belt, though she suspected it wouldn't be necessary. The growing knowledge in her enhanced mind suggested that the Kithara communication methods would be far more sophisticated than anything humanity had developed. Dr. Chun, Captain Reeves' voice came over the comm system. I want you to know that regardless of what happens over there, you'll always have a place aboard this ship. The sentiment was touching, but Sarah found herself wondering if she would still want to place aboard a human ship once the integration was complete. The pull she felt toward the Kithara vessel was growing stronger by the hour, and with it came a sense of belonging that she'd never experienced before. The shuttle pilot was young Ensign Parker, who kept glancing at Sarah with poorly concealed nervousness during the brief flight to the alien ship. Sarah couldn't blame him. The silver flecks in her eyes were becoming more pronounced, and she could feel other subtle changes beginning to manifest. Her fingernails were becoming slightly harder and more pointed, and her hearing was so acute that she could distinguish individual heartbeats among the crew. "Ma'am," Parker said as they approached the Kithara ship, "are you sure about this?" Sarah looked out at the organic curves of the alien vessel, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing in what she now recognized as communication signals. "More sure than I've ever been about anything, Ensign." The docking process was surprisingly smooth. The Kithara ship seemed to welcome their shuttle, with organic conduits extending from its hull to create a perfect environmental seal. As they made contact, Sarah felt a surge of recognition that was both deeply personal and completely alien. "I'm home," she whispered, then was startled by her own words. Parker's face had gone pale. "Dr. Chun, maybe we should. Thank you for the transport."